Hello, Spark fans. Welcome back to Advancing Spark, brought to you by Advancing Analytics, your friendly neighborhood data and AI consultancy. It's time for another Databricks newscast. We're going to be looking at August and September together because I was so unbelievably busy in September with the Big Data London, with the Data and AI World Tour, so many events, meeting so many of you guys who do watch the show. So thanks for coming and saying hello. Thanks for watching, all that good stuff. Now it's time to dive into some news. We're going to use the Azure Databricks release notes. Now, if you're in AWS, GCP, using it elsewhere, use those release notes, not the Azure ones. Just use whichever one you happen to be using. They're all very similar because they're trying to keep feature parity across the different platforms these days. If you're new around here, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know which bits are actually good for you, anything you've been waiting for, bits you don't quite know why it's in there. Just let us know, get involved. Let's go and have a look. Right, okay, so I've got August 2024 in the Azure release notes. I'm going to scroll right down to the bottom so we get the things that came in first, and then we can kind of go chronologically as things released and just have a bit of a chat. The plan. So, first things first is a fairly big one. Lakehouse Federation's gone GA. Lakehouse Federation is essentially, we've got Unity Catalog, which gives us our catalog, schemas, tables, all of our data that we've stored and put a SQL representation of. Lakehouse Federation allows us to add other data stores. So I want to get Snowflake, I want to get Microsoft SQL Server, and have that appear in UC. I want to have access controlled by Unity Catalog, and I want to be able to join it together to other things without moving the data and landing that into my lake. I just want to be able to go and query it as an external data source. It's essentially what Lakehouse Federation is. That's now GA, and there's a few improvements that have gone in there, so do take a look out and use that. Definitely, SSO for SQL Server is going to be big for lots of people in Azure. So yeah, that's a fairly big one. Other ones going GA, we've got row filters and column masks. That is our security things. Row filters being row level security. So I log in, I'm in a certain group, therefore I get a filtered view of my data. That is a big security feature inside of UC. That going GA is great. And there's a bunch of things that have now gone, one, places you can use it where you couldn't use it before, and a few kind of bits of functionality in there. So do check that out. That is super good to see. Notebooks have gotten prettier. If you've got your results displayed inside a notebook, you can now say, make that look like a percentage, make that look like a currency, as you'd expect with any kind of spreadsheet. It's just a general nicety to make it just more user-friendly, so it's great. Vector search is now HIPAA compliant, so if you're building RAG models and you're using the vector searcher to go and get some data and pull back, that's now compliant if you're in a HIPAA environment. Clean Rooms is now in public preview. This is super exciting. Now, we heard about clean rooms way over a year ago as this idea of going, well, I've got two separate parties. They've both got really interesting data sets, and they want to build a machine learning model or some kind of summary aggregate, some kind of output that uses both sets of data, but they don't want each other to see their own data. So, yeah, you can use my data to train your AI model. You can't see the individual rows. That's not allowed. Clean Rooms is doing exactly that. It allows you two different parties put their data into a single box, run a script that they're both approved on it, and the output can then be taken by one party or both parties, but they can never see the actual data each one sent into it. So if you've got any environments like that, if you've got kind of sensitive data where you're happy for it to be used for training, but you don't want people to see the actual row by row information, Clean Rooms is doing that. That's now in public preview. So seeing that come out and you get into the environment is going to be super interesting. So yeah, good. Foundational models using paper tokens now, GA. That's not available in all regions. That's the one where I want to go and, use Llama 3.1. I want to go and use an off-the-shelf large language model, but I don't want to just pay for provision throughput. I just want to, each time I do it, I want to pay-per-click. That is now GA, but again, not in all regions yet. But it's really good. A lot of the things like the SQL queries where you can do AI classify, AI generate, AI query, are all using foundation models, so that's going to be really good to see. Compute policy enforcement's now in place. You could already set cluster policies, but if someone had already had a cluster, that wouldn't be affected by the policy necessarily. You can now say, no, this is now the policy, and it gets enforced, so people have to follow it. So that's always interesting. Little one, you can no longer have identical names in workspace folders. Kind of a thing you thought you'd never be able to do, but you can now do that. So that's good. Hopefully, I don't think that will affect too many people, because if you were doing that already, that would be madness. You can now specify certain columns to sync when you're building out a vector search index. So the way vector search injectors work, essentially you're grabbing a delta table in Unity Catalog, clicking on it and saying make a vector search index off this, and it will kind of just sync the whole table. Anytime that table changes, it'll replicate all of those changes into the separate embeddings vector database copy that is keeping of it. That can be massively inefficient. Now saying, actually, just keep these columns up to date. That's what we can now do. So if you've got a big delta table, you don't want to create a separate copy of that table with fewer columns. You just want to say, well, maintain the index based on the ID and these two columns. You can now do that. That's cool. Good to see. We can now wrap lines in notebook cells. So if you are an old school Python developer and you're like, no, Python is not a multi-line language. I'm going to write the longest line in the world of chained functions, and I want to keep it on one line. Well, that can be you now. You can do that now. So if you have anything that's not going over multiple lines, you can toggle that on and then just get a scroll bar so you can just have really, really, really long lines of code. I would argue you don't need to do that very often, but I'm sure there's use cases why this has come up. But yeah, we'll see. Clusters API now supports partial updates, so rather than have to recreate the whole thing, you can just update that. It'd be a little bit easier, be slightly more efficient updating things. Your Databricks PAT tokens. So a personal access token, if I was trying to delegate access to like a command line interface, okay, here's my token, just log in as me. If I hadn't used that for 90 days, well, previously I'd set an expiry. So I'd say I will expire this after 10 days, 90 days, or 0. Never expire this PAT token. And this is saying, well, even if I told it never to expire, if no one's used it for 90 days, 3 months, just kill it. It's obviously dead. Now that means there's things I've used for training and things in the past which I haven't picked up, and they'll now have died. And I'll have to recreate the PAT token, but that's no big thing. Just be aware if there's things that you use once a year that might struggle if you do that, but I think that's quite rare, right? Databricks JDBC driver has been updated, so there's a bunch of changes in there. It's always good because that's usually a precursor to other integrations then being updated. There's a few things that have gone in there. Dig into the details if you want to. Llama 3.1 405 billion model is the huge latest version, the model from Llama, now available in AI model training. So you can go and use that to train it. You can fine tune it. You can do various things on there. So again, just more and more that cadence of the latest models just coming in, drip feeding. I say now it's the latest back at the start of August, a little while ago now. Workspace search now supports volumes. So we've seen a bunch of updates in workspace search. So it was originally just, it would look for the literal string that you'd put and said, does anything contain this string? It then got added, like in the last month or two. So actually it uses semantics. So actually get, well, things they've asked for customer, but also look at clients and customers and the various different things that they could mean. Again, using that large language model style querying. Now it's expanding the remit of that. So not just physical objects that it sees, not just things that are in the workspace, but it can also go and have a look at volumes that you got registered with Unity Catalog as well. Again, just making it more and more and more powerful. Speaking of getting more powerful, there's a bunch of updates in here around the Databricks Assistant. Now, previously, we'd have to ask it a specific question. So, rewrite my code to be better formatted might be something that we'd write. And we'd have to teach people about how to actually craft that prompt, right? They need to ask the question in a certain way to get the right result. Bunch of shortcuts, so you can have these slash commands, which are kind of like pre-built prompts to tell it to do a certain action. So I can do things like go search my list of tables, go search my list of queries to go and bring things back. Prettify. So like we can do slash fix when it'll try and fix a problem in my code. Slash prettify will go and format my code, which is nice. Rename objects. Go and change cells in my notebook. And this is kind of starting to see a change of behavior of the assistant from it being a purely informational, it's going to answer questions for you and tell you the answer, or best case, it's going to come up with changes to your code and apply those into the cell that you're asking this question on. This is starting to say, well, actually, it's got a further remit than that. I can say, we'll change some settings, and it'll make general notebook settings for me. And we'll see some more of these things coming in a little bit, just as it becomes more of an agent framework kind of thing. It's got just more and more tools that it can go and do. It can go and do lots more stuff for us, but we'll come on to that. So, very cool. We can change the default access mode for jobs compute. I mean, that is good, super useful. You'd have to overwrite it each time, which is annoying. Personalized notebook autocomplete. Again, this is an improvement to how the assistant's starting to work. It used to train itself based on the workspace and Unity Catalog and just go generally, oh yeah, well that table exists, I'll use that in my suggestions. But but now it's starting to do it based on the individual who is using it. So if you normally query one set of tables with a certain pattern, and I query things differently, when I start typing, it'll have my own history prioritized in terms of the suggestions it gives me. Just going to make it better for people. It's going to make it, people have just a general better experience. The more you use Databricks, the more information I'll have about your own usage patterns, the better autocomplete's going to be. So yeah, super interesting. There's a new LTS runtime, which we'll dig into in a little bit. Getting to open that just so we've got it there later. We've got RBAC permissions for workspace admins. It used to be, in Azure certainly, you'd have to be either the owner or contributor in order to be an admin. Was now actually just separated out that RBAC control, so you can now just say, well, actually, we're going to have a separate role for Databricks admins. Doesn't mean you have to be contributor on the resource. So, good, useful. We saw this the other day. Last video I did was looking at in Databricks jobs. You've got this whole idea of having a for each task, so we can start to build dynamic looping orchestration directly inside Databricks workflows. That is now GA. You can go and have a play with it. You can follow the patterns I put out in the last video. Delta sharing's got a few more support, so you can now do the timestamp NTZ as a thing you can do, which is good. Delta's also going to push more things into Power BI connectors. So previously, if you're using Delta sharing, we saw deletion vectors and uniform get supported by Delta sharing, but the connectors then using it through things like Power BI hadn't been updated. So using a previous protocol, they can now do that. So again, very useful. If you're using Delta sharing and Power BI together, you've got a bit more functionality you can now use. Python code formatting is going to get better. So if you just indented a load of stuff, but you haven't like wrapped it in brackets, it'll be like, why have you indented? That's a formatting error. It'll do that now as you type, rather than you have to run it and then it'll go, I don't know what that is. Why is that indented? So just generally the code reviewer getting better, getting more and more faster, getting more useful. System tables for Lakeflow, that's all the workflow kind of things. They've now got additional columns, but that in a non-breaking way, so they just appended a load of extra stuff. So if you're, again, system tables will, I think they've gone GA somewhere else. System tables is that telemetry about your Databricks platform. So you'll be able to run queries based on what are all the jobs across all the different workspaces people have been running and get information about the runtime for different IDs and the parent run IDs and why it broke, all that stuff. That's now in those system tables, which is great. Some cost management stuff. So there's an importable cost management dashboard you can pull into your account console. So if you want to try and give people like a general high-level view of where people are spending money across your Databricks estate, that is now possible. Again, it's in public preview, but they're starting to see some more of those things come. This is one of the ones I was hinting at earlier, in that the Databricks Assistant is replacing the Databricks Slack-based support channel. So previously, you can go just ask support, and it was just basically a person responding to you in a big old Slack channel. That's now being replaced by Databricks Assistant, which can now do things like go and find something in technical documentation and give you the relevant link, acting a bit like a RAG model there. It can create tickets for you. It can create a service desk ticket that will then go into the normal support ticket workflow, but all done via that, the assistant, the chatbot, that kind of stuff. So again, it's more that move from it being it's like a large language model just going to answer some questions for you and it'll just provide some kind of answer, to it's getting these tools attached to it that it can go off and go, oh, okay, this is a problem. I'll raise a ticket for you. Here's your ticket ID. That's now in a workflow. It can go and actually do things on your behalf, and we're seeing more and more of those things go in. So yeah, very cool. We're seeing some of the older models get retired. There is a big old matrix of, if you were using one of the previous models, or using one of the old Llama models, now use the 3.1 model. If you're using one of the old instructed models, now use the mixed model. There's just a general decommissioning as some of these models are getting a little bit more out of date. Final thing on the August updates is now you can see how much Unity catalog you're using. So if you're getting close to the top of the total number of tables or catalogs or things that you're allowed to see, you can go and just query that. And it'll say, yeah, you've got plenty of space because the limits are absolutely huge. So yes, you can go and do that now. That was August. That's already quite a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, September, same again. Let's keep cracking on. There's more stuff going through. So in September, first thing we saw is system tables going GA. Now I mentioned that they are the tables you can plug in, say, yes, please update this, and it'll scrape a load of APIs and it'll start landing telemetry data about your Databricks usage. Anything from, I mean, it's pretty easy to do. We dive into that big old list, loads of things in there, looking at general audit of who's accessed which users have accessed which tables, which tables, like the lineage that you see inside Unity Catalog, you can pull that out. The column level lineage, you can go and pull that and query it. Billing, what have you done that has incurred DBU costs? You can go and pull that out. Pricing, what current SKU pricing are you? You can go and use that to look things up. Clusters, what are the settings for your different clusters? And then nodes, how have your clusters been used? When were they turned on? What were they doing when they were turned on? How much were they utilized? All of that stuff is in there. Same on the SQL Warehouse side. So you had a SQL serverless, it got turned on, it got turned off, it got turned on, it got turned off. That's all going to be logged. Jobs, we talked about, that's all the Lakeflow ones telling us loads of stuff in there about what jobs are run, how long did they take, what were the tasks, all of that breakdown. Marketplace, are we using it? Predictive optimization. So, oh yeah, we went and optimized your table for you because it's a managed table. The logs of when that's happened, super useful. Databricks Assistant events. What users have asked of the assistant and how much it was used and how long it took, what happened in there, all of that is logged. Plus some model serving stuff and other things. So many things are now appearing in system tables, and they are now GA for you to go and use. If you're not yet using Unity Catalog, madness, just start using Unity Catalog because it's free and makes Databricks so much better. If you are using Unity Catalog and you're not using system tables, you're missing out on a huge amount of observability. There are so many people out there trying to sell you data observability tools. First things first, have a look what you can get from system tables because it's baked in. Just need to turn it on. Function calling is now supported on foundational model APIs, provisioned throughput. Function calling is when I can give it those kind of tools going, well, here's a little function saying raise a service ticket. Here's a function saying go and run this query. I can build a load of functions, give that to my large language models, and then say, yeah, just go and call these things if you want to do it. I can now do that on provisioned throughput. So it's just enabling me to build more sophisticated things using bigger models, and that all builds out together. So very cool. Databricks extension for the Databricks extension for Visual Studio Code is now GA. So if you're using VS Code and you're doing stuff in there, again, the Databricks extension's got more and more stuff in. Again, much hardened up with Databricks Connect via Spark Connect. Lots of stuff going on in there, which is good. There's now a system table for clean room usage. So if you're using the preview of clean rooms, you can now do some telemetry on the usage of clean rooms, but not seeing the data. That's a big part of it. AI-generated comments have gotten even better. So if you've been using Unity Catalog and you click on a table, it will go, well, I've generated the description for you. If you're looking at all the columns in a table, you can push a button and it'll generate descriptions of all the different columns. This has now been extended, so we can now go and do volumes, models, functions, schemas, catalogs, all of the other objects inside of Unity, not just the data tables. So now there's absolutely no excuse not to have everything inside of Unity Catalog actually documented. Just read it. If it generates something for you, check it, make sure it's right, and then click accept. Don't just bland accept everything, because then that's just as bad as having no data. Okay, we've got more models going into model training, so we can now build our own models and fine-tune things based on these other base foundation models that are going in there, which is good. AI Gateway is now public preview. Now, this is essentially an API manager. It's kind of a bit like APIM mixed with a kind of saved credential manager for lots of common AI tools. So it means you can say, well, okay, I've got my AI Gateway. This is controlling how I'm accessing Azure OpenAI, or this open service model, or DBRX, a bunch of different things in there. And these things are so important, and they're the biggest, hardest thing to do when you are productionizing and hardening a Gen AI model. So being able to say, well, how many queries is a user allowed to put through a second? How much can people absolutely explode the cost? How much do we need to track what questions people have asked and what responses? Do we want to track it? Do we not want to track it? Who's using it? Are we getting, there's 1,000 users a second. Is that like loads of users loving it? No, it's one really, really keen person. Cool, we can track that. We can look at those behaviors. We can stop people sending data they shouldn't send. We can make sure it's safe. We can make sure it's protected. Some of the guardrails are in there. And magically, we can do normal load balancing stuff. Oh, actually, one of the models has gone down. Just route over to a different region's version of that model and we can fail over. We've had to build that manually in the past when doing productionized Gen AI models. Just nice that we can have this kind of thing going in there. So AI Gateway, now public preview. You can go and have a look at that in relevant regions. Mosaic AI model training is now available to all customers in public preview. Again, not all customers, just for certain regions. None of which are in Europe. But yeah, that's being pushed out. We're seeing it going out. Again, that is when you're doing fine-tuning or continued training of a foundational model. So if you don't want to take an off-the-shelf model, you don't want to build a RAG kind of architecture where it's going off, getting some embeddings, and putting that into our prompt. You instead want to take that model and retrain it or fine-tune the end of it, just so it's actually got our data and our context in there. More and more tools coming out to do that in certain regions to allow you to manage that effectively. So, very cool. We saw in other places in Databricks, we're getting that cost spending dashboard. We can now do budgets. So we now say, well, I want to monitor the spending, but can we just like stop people spending? We can now do that. So we can say certain different filters, certain different things we're comparing against. Actually, costs have gone up to there, but it's okay because our budget was there. We're on budget. Just a little bit more sophistication about how we're actually managing spend in Databricks is great. Going in. Databricks Assistant now just suggesting quick single line fixes when running code. So if you do an error, it'll go, oh, no, I'm just going to fix it to this. Which caught me out the other day. I was running some training and I deliberately wrote something that was going to break to demonstrate that's not how Spark works. And I ran it and then it went, oh, no, I'm just going to fix that. I was like, oh, it's getting harder and harder to make mistakes now, even deliberately. But yeah, so that is in there. So just you'll notice that behavior if you've got the Databricks Assistant turned on. Embedded models now supported, so that is the Alibaba embeddings model. And again, embeddings are for if we're essentially taking some code, turning it into embeddings so that we can put it into a vector database so we can do a RAG architecture lookup based on it. All semantic similarity kind of things generally. So that is now available on the provisioned throughput as a specific type of embeddings model if that's the one you want to use. We can now do things, so there's more and more things being able to access Unity Catalog via external APIs, and we've now got some new controls about how people do that. So if you're in Iceberg or if you're in Fabric and you're connecting to Unity Catalog using their open AIs, you've now got this new external use schema. So that allows people coming in to authenticate properly. AI Playground has gotten a little bit better. You can now export tool calling GenAI agents. That's good. So we're talking about that ability for our large language models to be this agent framework, essentially a large language model that figures out what to do and then calls other small ones to go and run tasks, run some SQL, export something, all that kind of stuff. So again, more things going into the AI Playground to let us play with that and build it and do things. So yeah, it's very cool. Very plugged into Unity Catalog as well, because you can go and call existing functions and that kind of stuff. Seeing more and more stuff happen there. More stuff happening with Databricks Assistant. You can just do an @ sign and refer to an existing table. So you could be saying, well, run a query on this table. And so you can be deliberate rather than just have to give the name of a table and it work out that you're talking about a table in Unity Catalog. You can do @ mention an actual table, and then it will know you're referring exactly to that specific table. Just allows you to be much clearer in the prompts that you're giving. Push to Power BI now, GA. So if you're in Databricks, you can go to a particular schema, you can go to a table, you can hit Publish to Power BI, and it will make a new data model and push that as a semantic model into Power BI directly. Now, I've seen people excited about that, and I've seen people really not excited about it. Most Power BI devs that I know would prefer to build their own semantic model using desktop and actually be able to craft it, customize it exactly how they want, and then push it out. If you're just saying, no, my curated model in my data lake is great, just put that directly over. That's what that button is for, and that's now GA, so you can do that directly. Okay, more models. So it's now announcing the Llama 3.2 models coming in and being supported in model training. So that's the next generation, the next iteration. You can go and do that. Again, seeing those pushed out in both training and serving. Vector search is now available to all customers. So if you're trying to, in your query, go off and have a look at one of those vector search indexes, that embedding that database of embeddings that you're using to search during things like RAG, you can now do that. And that is now in public preview, and that's now lit up for public preview across workspaces. You don't need to ring up Databricks and ask them, pretty please, can you have it? And again, then that big chunky 3.1 instruct is now available for function calling, that same functionality, but rolled onto the big version of Llama 3.1. Whoa, that's a lot of stuff. So loads of stuff going on across August and September on the Databricks platform. Now, very quickly, we do have the 15.4 LTS runtime, which is also now out. A couple of things we just need to highlight on there. A couple of things are going to break. So if you're using a variant as the input type or output type of a Python UDF, that's going to break now. So be a little careful. That is a breaking change. And it's really rare we see breaking changes when we're in a minor release. Normally, if they're putting in a breaking change, we go to runtime 16. could have a breaking change involved. But yeah, be aware that is a behavior change. A few other bits in terms of schema binding, if you're doing materialized views, slightly different. You're no longer allowed to use an exclamation mark instead of writing the word not. Again, it's changing behavior, it's moving closer to standard SQL, all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's becoming more just copy and paste your T-SQL in there. Not full T-SQL, obviously, but it's getting closer to ANSI standard and what it's allowed to do. So it's getting closer. Again, just have a look through these. I think they're the two main ones I would worry about. Other stuff that's now actually come in terms of features, there's a bunch of Unicode features with the UTF-8 functions coming in. A bunch of things you can do to check it and make sure it's valid, to validate it. A bunch of Scala things in terms of making data sets a little bit more supported across UDFs, across Unity Catalog, all that kind of stuff. You can now turn on uniform for Iceberg. So uniform is that thing where I've got a delta table, and I don't just want the delta metadata, I wanted to make the iceberg metadata as well, so I can query it as if it was an iceberg table, query it as if it was a delta table. That used to mean I had to rewrite the whole table. Now, I can just use alter table, and it'll work. Cool. I can try and decode a URL, so I can test if a URL is a valid URL, which is good. I can force the optimizer to believe that my foreign key constraints are good. So my foreign key constraints are not enforced. That's not changing. It is assumed referential integrity. But I can say, yeah, I've loaded it properly. You can rely on that. And that'll just mean the optimizer is going to assume that's going to be a great join. It's going to do an inner join based on it. And it's going to change how it actually builds out that query plan based on that. So that is a performance-based keyword if you are sure that you do have referential integrity between your primary and foreign keys. As long as you do, grand, turn that on, and that will actually make things go a bit faster, which is great. Two things for replace where. So replace where is essentially, I think of it like a partition switch. So if I'm writing into a partition delta table, I'll say, well, actually get rid of that month and just replace the whole month. Don't do a merge, because it's going to compare so many different records. Literally, I'm replacing every record in there with a new data set. That's what replace where does. It's particularly efficient, even replacing whole partitions at once. But it used to do it kind of in serial. If replacing 3 partitions, well, I'll do the first one, do the second one, do the third one. It would do the writes in parallel to each partition, but it would do the partitions in serial. That is now changed. So now I'll now do that in parallel, which is great. And then it's also actually changed how, if we've got change data feed turned on, it's going to do that more efficiently as well. So a bunch of things going in there. Copy into has also got faster. They've changed how that works. Copy into is when you've got a bunch of files and you think, well, apply that file, apply that file, apply that file. But you're not going the auto loader route. Again, just some efficiencies of going around there. So it's not doing the write to the checkpoint and then do the thing and then check RocksDB. All that, it's just going to be a lot more asynchronous, a lot faster. You can drop check constraints, which is nice and easy. Made things a little bit better. Ooh, haven't even looked at this one. So if you're in serverless, some of the fine-grained access control wouldn't necessarily work properly. Whereas now actually serverless has now been enabled to use a lot of those more advanced features inside Unity Catalog, which is great. And then there's some Scala stuff, again, kind of coupled with the ones up top, making sure data sets are actually still fully supported on there. Going GA, using Scala on shared compute. It's taken a long time to catch up, but then the popularity of Scala against Python is massively skewed these days, so it kind of makes sense to go in there first. Whoa! Okay. Ton of stuff in there. Again, reminder, that is now LTS. That is the latest long-term support runtime. So I know loads of people, rather than every few months jumping onto the very, very latest runtime, they just wait for the new LTS runtime to go GA, then they do the testing on there, and then they move it. So the hopping between LTS versions, that is now out there in GA. Just be very wary that there is a breaking change in there. But then, how many people were passing variants into Python UDFs already? It's not been around that long. I don't know. If it is a breaking change, it'll only break things that you built a month or 2 ago, as opposed to things that have been in prod for ages. So, yeah, we will see. That is all the impact that it has. Right, we got that. So, I'm going to put a link to both of those release notes down in the comments below. Tons and tons of things that you'll actually see in there. One, Databricks Assistant getting so much better. So many continued releases going in for it. Bunch of different just quality of life things. Bunch of different notebooks getting nicer. Bunch of different things going GA that we've been waiting on to appear. Loads of new preview functions that we're going to kind of slowly see appearing. And as ever with Databricks, that continued focus on making sure the Gen AI workflows are there. New models are there. More stuff to do is going in there. going on and on and on, getting more and more models that you can go and use with functions to build out agent frameworks or to do fine-tuning on. Just so much stuff going on. Right, I'm going to stop ranting. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know which bits you like, which bits you like. I don't know what the point is. Always good to hear what you guys think of it. And yeah, I'll catch you next time. Cheers.